Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Leaving Season, a memoir in essays. By Kelly Mcmasters. Narrated by Kelly Mcmasters. For anyone who has ever left or wanted to. The heart of another is a dark forest, always, no matter how close it has been to one's own. By Willa Cather, The Professor's House. With our pack of memories slung slack on our backs, we venture into the circle. Joy Harjo, Memory Sack. You think this happened only once and long ago? Marie Howe, you think this happened only once and long ago. Home fires. What should we save, Mama? Every year, my children come home asking the same question after the annual fire safety assembly at their elementary school. What should we save if the house is on fire? We make plans, the three of us, for what to grab, how to get out, where to meet. We'd come together at the fire hydrant in front of our apartment, they decide, its glossy red head a beacon of safety to them. I don't explain that we likely wouldn't be able to get close to the hydrant because the fire truck would need that space, thinking that if the kids made it to the hydrant and I did not, someone would collect them and keep them safe. We won't have a fire anyway, I reassure them. This is all just precaution. Precaution. Care taken in advance. A kind of controlled burning. But then, this winter, there are 2 house fires on our street. Both at night, both kitchen fires, a few weeks between them, both houses with children in them. The sirens bring the neighbors out into the middle of the street, and we huddle and remark, point from afar. No one is hurt. Donation pages are created. One house is quickly taped off and under reconstruction within a few weeks, puffs of damaged insulation curling over a dumpster in the driveway like yellowed cotton candy. The other house sits quiet and dark. Broken windows covered with plywood, circulars piled on the stoop like wet leaves. The neighborhood children claim the property, climbing the single tree in front of this house day after day, hanging from its limbs in front of the sagging facade, intuitively understanding that this house has been abandoned, long before the adults realize. The children have no appetite for nostalgia. Preciousness can't compete with their craving to turn the tree into their own Roxaboxen kingdom. They quickly forget their friends who used to live there, what cars belonged to this driveway. The home's history washes away. The fire, the family, only as real as the sound of a song that just ended. In her book, The Future of Nostalgia, Svetlana Boym calls nostalgia, quote, a longing for a home that no longer exists or has never existed, end quote. There is romance inherent in loss and longing. In order for humans to move on after loss, collective memory shifts and binds together, agreeing on a shared memory of the past or of a place, a new beauty. Boym cautions us against believing in the truth of our nostalgia. We are lulled into trusting that this new beauty, this lie, is safe to believe because access to the past, to home, to a place, to a person, is impossible. There is no fact-checking for nostalgia. Years ago, when the boys and I lived with their father in an old farmhouse in the middle of the woods, I obsessed over fire safety. I kept a go-bag packed. I tucked fire ladders under the beds, stationed a fire extinguisher in the kitchen, and another near the wood stove. I was so focused on preventing fires inside the house, I was unable to see until it was too late that our family had been consumed by a less spectacularly dramatic catastrophe. Marriage, after all, is just one long exercise in controlled burning. Each time we do this annual safety exercise, my son's answers change about what they would save. This year at the assembly, the kids were told to choose a pillowcase and fill it with a flashlight and soap, bottled water, and a first aid kit. But they don't care about those things, and our flashlight's battery is dead. They stuff their cases with toys, a taekwondo belt, candy. The boys never ask me what I would save. In our apartment, this small space that holds the three of us quietly at the dead end of a tree-filled suburban street, I feel insulated. Perhaps a better word is inoculated, immunized by whatever calamities we've already experienced or escaped. And whatever steel trap we may yet be marching toward, I feel somehow confident that a house fire is not part of those scissored jaws. Still, as I quietly kiss my sons goodnight, their sleeping heads become flames of burnt umber, and the streetlights shine through their window, and I play along in my mind. I think of the robin's egg blue box tucked high in my closet with the crusted twigs of my children's umbilical cords, soft nosegays of baby hair from their first haircuts, the nubby flannel blankets they came home in from the hospital. I think of my grandmother's dainty wedding ring tucked inside the faded purple Shalimar clamshell box in the basement. I think of my journals. I also think of all the things I'd leave behind, the things I would let burn. There are so many. Intrepid. The Navy aircraft carrier USS Intrepid feels a bit like the island of Manhattan itself. A floating slab of metal that is a feat of engineering, dependent upon a complex set of social and mechanical systems that, should they fail, would condemn its inhabitants to death. The ship is a kind of skyscraper on its side, its body pushing against the sparkling water like a listless gray whale. The aircraft carrier docked on Pier 86 of the Hudson River on Manhattan's west side is the fourth Navy ship to bear the name. The Intrepid was the 11th carrier commissioned by the United States. Of the first 10, one other was turned into a museum, 3 were scrapped, and 6 were sunk in various battles or, in the Saratoga's case, as a nuclear test target in Bikini Atoll. After coming online in 1943, the Intrepid churned in the seas during World War II, the Cold War, and the Vietnam War, as well as working as a recovery vessel for the Gemini and Mercury space missions, plucking astronauts out of the water after they'd just rained down from outer space. The ship was decommissioned in 1974 and turned into a museum 8 years later. I first saw the Intrepid in 1999. I knew nothing of its history at the time, just that it was the site of that evening's work party. I'd moved to the city after college the previous year. My plan to move to California fell through when I was offered a job as a corporate legal assistant at a law firm down near Wall Street instead. I'd been working summer and part-time gigs since I was 14, but this was my first full-time job, and with my new position, a sense of adulthood bloomed. The acceptance letter came to my campus mailbox on periwinkle blue letterhead. Winthrop, Stimson, Putnam, and Roberts. Starting salary, $25,000. I shared a 3-bedroom apartment with 2 college friends in Brooklyn. My rent was $1,000 a month, and I couldn't believe I'd have 13,000 whole dollars to spend as I pleased for the year. The week before my start date, I went to Century 21 with my roommates and tried on racks of single-button suits, feeling like Melanie Griffith in Working Girl. I spent that year working 90-hour weeks, sleeping under my desk, taking company-comped private cars home to my Brooklyn apartment, feeling rich from the overtime wages piling up in my bank account because I had no time to spend them. The legal assistant bullpen became my whole life. We worked together, ate together, cried in the bathroom together, went to bars after work together, vacationed together, slept together. The whole law firm was a complicated ecosystem of liaisons between legal assistants and other legal assistants and lawyers, junior lawyers and partners. One stormy night, when almost everyone else had gone home, David, one of the other legal assistants, led me to a dark conference room on the 32nd floor with a perfect view of the Twin Towers. David's girlfriend worked as a legal assistant in a different department, And I was dating one of the lawyers at the time, but that night we cracked one of the windows and he told me jokes in his North Carolinian drawl as we smoked cigarettes and kissed, pausing to watch dramatic zigzags of brilliant white lightning strike the Twin Towers directly in front of us. The North Tower, crowned by a broadcast antenna, was 360 feet taller than the South Tower and was hit more often during storms. But they both acted as the city's de facto lightning rods, collecting the brunt of strikes from passing storms and keeping the rest of downtown safe while delivering a reliable show from our conference room. The party that night on the Intrepid was to celebrate the new crop of summer associates plucked from law school that year. My coworker Annette and I were excited to scope out the handsome ones. But despite the party lights and the wind coming off the river blowing up the women's skirts and pushing the men's ties over their shoulders, as I clinked up the rickety metal staircase in my roommate's strappy heels, I couldn't push away a feeling of gloom. The more we danced and drank, the sadder I became. The Intrepid had survived 5 kamikaze attacks and a torpedo strike, and here I was, a 20-something, guzzling drinks with glow-in-the-dark swizzle sticks and just hoping to make out with someone in the cockpit of one of the helicopters perched on the ship's deck. I looked around at our bullpen group, most of whom would be leaving in the next few months. Annette was going to Tulane Law, David to Kellogg for an MBA. I hadn't understood that this job was meant to be a strategic stepping stone for collecting experience and references to bolster law and business school applications. I'd missed the deadlines. I hadn't even taken the LSAT yet. I wanted to go to law school, or I thought I did. I'd grown up in a blue-collar town on the South Shore of Long Island, where a simplistic equation was engraved into my brain early on. Job plus suit equals success. After a dozen interviews, this was the only place to offer me a job after college, so I went with it. The money was good, and I didn't need to be in the office until 10 a.m., except for when I worked late nights and wound up sleeping an hour or so under my desk, of course. On those days, I was technically the first to work after visiting the breakfast buffet in the corporate cafeteria and changing out my pantyhose. I didn't mind the pace, but I was beginning to question some things. I noticed there were no female partners, and very few female associates, for example. I cat-sat for one of them regularly and mooned over her sprawling Tribeca loft. The apartment was on a cobblestoned corner, straight out of Life magazine. From the building's front door, the Odeon restaurant hunkered low in the foreground, with the World Trade Center buildings rising impossibly high above everything else, like 2 stern teachers towering over a class of preschoolers. It felt like the Trade Center towered over the whole city in those days. The lawyer's apartment was in a converted warehouse, the kind with a cage elevator that makes you feel like you're entering into a horror movie every time you pull the lever. I loved it. The kitchen consisted of an industrial sink and a microwave, and the toilet was in a closet all by itself. Along one whole wall stretched hundreds of books piled on chunky wooden bookshelves. Every other surface was covered in old New Yorker magazines and cat hair, the geometric faded shapes on the scattershot collection of Persian rugs clashing deliciously against the velour thrift store couches. Until then, I had not realized that one could show up to work in designer black crepe suits and a severe black bob with bangs and come home to a place that rejected every pin-straight hair and hem. After my first few months at the firm, I'd been tapped for a case involving a group of Holocaust survivors who'd petitioned to recover valuables and cash that had been stolen by the Nazis during the war and secreted away in Swiss banks. In college, I had studied collective memory in post-war Germany, and I had a working knowledge of German. I'd spent a summer in Munich, researching my thesis on Holocaust memorials. The case would require extensive travel to Switzerland and Germany, and I couldn't believe my good fortune when I was offered the position. The only problem, my firm was representing the banks. I asked for some time to think about it, and was given until the end of the week. Some of the other legal assistants didn't understand my hesitation and argued that the travel opportunity was worth it. Who cared about the case? travel had become increasingly important to me. Along with my summer in Munich and another school-funded research trip to Berlin, I'd traveled to Vietnam with the first group of American students allowed into the country on a history department trip sophomore year, and during my junior year at the London School of Economics, I used the breaks to backpack through much of Northern and Eastern Europe. But in the end, I couldn't stomach working for the banks. I politely declined and was shuffled off onto a Bangladeshi project finance deal, subjected to months of midnight conference calls due to the time difference, and constant headaches from losing files and packages to what seemed like ever-present floods and monsoons. I still felt guilty when I clicked swiftly past the placard-wielding protesters who stationed themselves outside our lobby after the Holocaust case hit the news. But I weakly rationalized that at least my paycheck wasn't coming directly from the Nazi spoils since I'd refused to work on that project. After about 6 months of penance on the Bangladeshi case, I was given another chance to travel. The bank, our client, was in Tokyo. I flew there with my suitcase full of Century 21 suits and took a taxi to the most luxurious hotel I'd ever seen in my life. Pamela, the lawyer I was paired with, had been in Tokyo for a few weeks already. She had left her new baby at home for the gig, and now she kept apologizing for adjusting her swollen breasts under her blouse. We worked in the bank's office on a floor consisting entirely of men, except for a few female secretaries. Everyone called us the lady lawyers. The office was open concept, which was not the custom yet in New York, and everyone smoked at their desks as well as in the elevators. Even the bathroom stalls had ashtrays next to the complicated set of bidet buttons. Pamela and I took refuge in the smokeless privacy of a corner conference room, and the two of us fell into an easy rhythm during the day. We joined the team for dinner and drinks after work, but never socialized together beyond that. I spent most of my nights alone at the hotel bar drinking whiskey until I retired to my room to listen to American military radio just for the comfort of English, trying not to dial my college boyfriend's phone number before passing out, staring at my own reflection in the mirrored headboard of the king-sized bed. One afternoon, breaking news scrolled across the always-on television mounted in the corner of the conference room. Violence had marred an environmental protest. A group of people had chained themselves to trees and bulldozers in an attempt to stop a construction project in an ancient rainforest somewhere in the Philippines. The corporate security forces had shot into the crowd, wounding half a dozen and killing one man. I watched Pam's face go stony as she reached for the phone, uncharacteristically cursing under her breath. Within minutes, the quiet sanctuary of our conference room filled with chain-smoking bankers gesticulating and rubbing their furrowed brows, and I came to understand that the project we were helping the bank finance was the dam and power plant that was being protested on the screen. Thousands of villagers whose families had lived there for centuries and relied on fishing would be displaced. "Don't worry," the bankers reassured me later at dinner. "We're paying them to learn new trades like basket weaving." I lasted another 3 weeks. The isolation of living in a country whose language I could not speak, the awful juxtaposition of reading paragraphs about profits and the average time it took fishermen to be retrained during the day, and attending luxurious corporate dinners at night, the insulating distance between our conference room and those protesters chaining themselves to bulldozers, the amount of whiskey it began taking to get me to sleep. The effects were deadening. On our last night, the bankers took the lady lawyers out to a hostess club. In the Tokyo of 1999, essentially a segregated strip club. The American girlfriend I was assigned for the night wore a high ponytail and a cheerleading uniform and said she was a college student from Texas, though she looked at least a few years older than me. We sat awkwardly together on the leather banquette. I bought her a $15 seltzer and excused myself to the bathroom. I was startled to open the door not to the staid, upscale lavatory I was expecting, but a locker room of women in different states of undress. Half the stalls acted more as small offices rather than places to pee. Disoriented, it took me a while to realize that many of the hostesses were speaking English. I felt a flush of solidarity, but when the women saw me, they turned away. My suit betrayed me. I was not one of them. On the cab ride back to the hotel that night, Pamela asked if I was still planning to go to law school after this trip. I told her I hadn't really thought about it. "Well, you should think about it," she said ruefully, looking out the window at the flashing lights of Shinjuku blinking by like a pinball game. "You don't really want to do this for the rest of your life, do you?" I realized that, as out of place as I may have felt that night, I hadn't stopped to imagine how Pamela felt, sitting between her hostess and the Japanese businessmen, her breasts an aching reminder of the thousands of miles between her and her baby. Months later, on the gray heft of the Intrepid, wind from the Hudson River blowing my hair into my face, I wobbled in my borrowed heels on the slick deck and finally started to think about it. I worried I'd keep winding up on the wrong side of things if I continued on this track. The legal assistants who were moving on to law school seemed to tacitly acknowledge that the king-size bed and fine whiskey were worth it. But those things had left me hollowed out. I wondered how on earth I'd get back down the stairs in these heels, and wondered how on earth I'd gotten up here in the first place. I read recently about a study testing safety equipment that found the majority of children sleep through a blaring fire alarm. There's something in a child's brain that hears a loud, obnoxious warning bell in the night and says, "Don't worry, I'm sure you'll be fine. You can ignore this warning bell and keep sleeping." In a city like New York, there are so many warning bells happening on a daily basis. The oppressive heat or icy cold while waiting for the subway, not enough money in the bank to cover the rent or a bag of groceries, the man yelling at you because you took too long at the coffee cart, the wallet lost in the yellow cab, the groping hand on a crowded subway, the beginning twinge of a blister on your heel. Sometimes it's difficult to parse which ones need to be paid attention to and which can be ignored. Sometimes it feels like my brain takes a while to understand that I am, in fact, in danger or discomfort. In my case, my therapist recently explained, I got the gene that once saved a caveman from a saber-toothed tiger by standing so completely still, the tiger ignored him. "This can be helpful," she cheered. But in the 21st century, it doesn't feel helpful. It feels more like a stupidly delayed reaction to fear and information. The warning bell is ringing, but my body keeps sleeping. It feels like I wait for things to happen to me and then sit, still as a photograph, watching. The morning of September 11th, 2001, I'd woken up earlier than usual because I had a doctor's appointment before work. I'd quit the law firm by this time and was working as an assistant editor at a technology magazine in the Flatiron district. One of the top editors brought me along with him after the .com startup we'd been working at imploded. I wasn't sure the magazine was for me, but at least I reported to a smart and funny female boss, and if I had to be stuck in a cubicle bullpen, I preferred this one full of writers and editors in jeans and t-shirts. I'd also switched from dating corporate types to Williamsburg artist types instead. I'd briefly dated a bassist, a rock and roll karaoke host, a hairstylist, and a programmer, and now I was seeing a painter. I'd been dating my current boyfriend, R, for more than 6 months, my longest post-college relationship yet. We spent our weekends in bars, wandering the Metropolitan Museum of Art, looking at his paintings, and eating pierogies. He was 8 years older, and there was a glimmer of serious possibility, but mostly I was more concerned with which party to go to on Thursday night and what color to dye my hair next. I had just turned 25 a few days earlier. I celebrated at a bowling alley and made treat bags for my friends filled with sweet tarts, paper cocktail umbrellas, and pink plastic flamingo drink stirrers. I lived with my friend Jenny in a windowless 2-bedroom on Spring Street, way west, just across from the Ear Inn. September 11th, 2001, was a primary day. And after the abject disappointment of the 2000 presidential election, with its hanging chads and recounts, I believed that my vote really did count, so I stopped to cast my ballot for the New York mayoral primary. The polling place was located in the coffee house on the corner of Varick and Spring Street. By the time I finished voting, it was just past 8:40 a.m., and I ran down the Spring Street station stairs and took the subway downtown to the World Trade Center stop. Everyone knows what happened at 8:46 a.m. that morning, but on that day, things did not become clear until much later. When I worked as a legal assistant, I was always zipping over to the Morgan Stanley or Lehman Brothers offices in the WTC. That's what we called it for shorthand, WTC, to drop off or pick up paperwork during deals. I knew that subway station in the building's cavernous basement well only because I'd gotten turned around there so many times. I also knew that if I had any hope of getting to my doctor's office on time, I needed to head up the stairs that opened directly into the WTC lobby so I could quickly get my bearings. When I stepped off the train, the subway platform was clogged with more people than usual, and I cursed along with the other commuters. The crush of complaining bodies forced me to a different exit than the one I needed, where I grumbled with the rest of the people around me until I hit the spot on the stairs where I could look up and see the towers outlined in the rectangle of the subway opening, a perfect portrait of fire. The people behind me on the stairs, the people who couldn't yet see and didn't understand why everyone who hit this particular spot was stopping cold, pushed me up and out. I found an empty space on the sidewalk to the left of a fire hydrant. A woman in pearls and high heels and honey-colored freshly blown-out hair stood to the hydrant's right. We watched trails of computer paper reams like comets slowly spinning through the air and flocks of white birds clustering at the mouth of the flames. There was no sound. All noise from above drifted away on the wind with the paper, floating out into the sky, kites of sound and fire. The woman said, or I said, "Was that?" And we kept staring up to the top of the skyscraper, eyes forgiving, pretending we hadn't seen what we had seen. "No," we said to each other, to ourselves. "No, no, no, no. Those are not people. They can't be." But of course they were. We stood and watched the people, jumping from the windows so many hundreds of feet above, jumping down to us with arms stretched wide. We could see their ties. We could see their suit jackets. We could see their legs scrambling as if pedaling imaginary bicycles. We would have stared longer, our mouths a soundtrack of silent no's, if the policeman hadn't yelled at us, furiously, "Run!" The alarm on his face shook me out of my stupor, and my mind slowly opened to the possibilities of what the fire above my head meant. The woman and I both ran, though I quickly lost her in the crush. I slipped on the cobblestones in my flip-flops, the crowd's sharp heels and shiny wingtips biting into the soft flesh of my feet. I thought of Pamplona and of the bull statue a few blocks away, and then I heard a crack so loud that I thought the top of the tower had broken off. It thundered through my head and body, and I dove into a doorway, closing my eyes, waiting for the splinters of stone and glass and steel to rain down on the streets. A man had ducked into the doorway with me, and we both stood with our backs against the door jamb, wordlessly facing each other, while we waited for the top of the tower to crash down onto the cobblestones. But nothing happened. The man was older, maybe in his 40s. He wore a tie, held his leather briefcase to his chest. The fear on his face, on such an adult face, shook me. I wanted him to look at me and see me and say, "Don't worry, I'll tell you what to do." I wanted him to say, "Here, hold my hand." Instead, he barely looked at me at all. The crowds kept running by us, and after a few moments, he slipped back in too, like a fish into a school, leaving me alone. After another frozen moment, I took a deep breath and followed. The top of the tower had not broken off, not yet. I learned later that the crack that had thundered through my chest was the second plane hitting the second tower. I only looked back when I was blocks away at the foot of the Brooklyn Bridge. I was confused when I saw both towers in flames and simply assumed the fire had somehow jumped from one to the other building, finding its way across like Philippe Petit, balancing between the twin buildings on his high wire. My cell phone, like everyone's cell phone, was dead. I stopped.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?